I used to think my family was ordinary. Complicated, sure, but ordinary, just another bunch of people thrown together by blood and circumstance, trying to navigate life under one roof. My parents, Emilio and Rosa, worked tirelessly to provide for us. My older brother, Daniel, was the golden child, the one with the perfect smile, the one who always seemed to walk into a room and immediately command everyone's attention. And then there was me. My name is Isabella, and for most of my life, I lived in the shadows of other people's expectations. I wasn't a failure, not exactly, but I wasn't the type of daughter my parents ever bragged about. I was quiet, bookish, always with a camera in hand. While Daniel basked in the spotlight, I found solace in freezing moment-tiny slivers of reality through my lens. My photographs were my way of telling stories when I couldn't find the words. But in my family, nobody valued that. At dinner tables, when relatives came over, my parents would beam as they spoke of Daniel's latest achievement. Daniel just got accepted into the law program, they'd announce. Or Daniel was voted captain of his debate team. When it was my turn, a pause. Then, oh, Isabella. She likes taking pictures. That was it. My identity reduced to a hobby they barely understood. I can't tell you how many times I swallowed my feelings staring at my plate as laughter swirled around me. They didn't mean to be cruel, I told myself. Maybe they just didn't know how much it hurt to be invisible in your own home. Still, that invisibility carved deep into me. I had one dream: to make photography more than just a hobby. I wanted to capture human stories, the raw, unfiltered emotions people tried to hide. So, in secret, I poured everything into a portfolio. Late nights hunched over my laptop, editing, cropping, adding light where there was none. There was a competition coming up, one that could change everything. The National Youth Photography Showcase. The winner's work would be displayed in a traveling exhibit across the country, their name etched into the world of professionals. I didn't dare tell my family. Not yet. Why? Because I already knew what they'd say. Isabella, you need a real career. Or worse, that little chuckle Daniel gave when he thought he was being supportive but really wasn't. That's smug. Cute idea, Izzy. But it's hard to make money with art. Cute idea. That phrase haunted me. Daniel and I used to be close. Once upon a time, he was my protector when we were kids. But as we grew, something shifted. His charm, his confidence qualities, people adored turned into weapons he used against me. Hey, Izzy, why didn't you take a picture of my good side? He'd joke when friends came over. Then he'd contort his face into something grotesque, pretending I was too incompetent to capture anything worthwhile. Everyone laughed, and I forced a smile, hiding the sting behind clenched teeth. Sometimes, though, his teasing had sharper edges, like the time I caught him snooping on my laptop. I'd left it open while grabbing a glass of water. When I returned, Daniel was scrolling through my private folder of edits. "These are interesting," he said, "the way someone might describe a child's finger painting. But Izzy, come on. Who's going to pay money to look at random people crying on a bench?" I snatched the laptop back, cheeks burning. "They're not random," I muttered. "They're stories." He smirked. "Stories no one asked for." And just like that, another piece of me folded inward. Our cousin Sophia was getting engaged, and the family was planning a massive celebration. Everyone would be their relatives flying in from across the country. It wasn't just a party. It was the event of the year for our family. Normally, I dreaded these gatherings. They were arenas where Daniel shined brightest, where my parents paraded him around like a trophy. But something inside me stirred this time. Maybe it was the growing confidence in my work. Maybe it was sheer desperation. But I decided I would bring my camera. Not just to capture the event, but maybe to show them who I really was. I fantasized about it, someone noticing my shots, complimenting them, validating what I had worked so hard for. Perhaps in some small way I could step out of Daniel's shadow. But deep down, I was afraid. Because in my family, stepping out of line came with a price. The week leading up to the engagement party was tense. I overheard Daniel joking with Mom in the kitchen. Do you think Izzy's even going to talk to anyone? Or will she just hide behind her camera like usual? Mom chuckled softly. Be nice, Daniel. I am nice, he replied with mock innocence. I just don't want her scaring people off by sticking that lens in their faces. This is Sophia's night, not Izzy's art project. Their laughter was casual, but to me it was deafening. I stormed back to my room, gripping my camera like a lifeline. My pulse raced. I wanted to scream, to tell them they had no idea how much their words cut. But I didn't. I stayed silent, as always, letting their dismissals sink deeper into my skin. That night, as I scrolled through my portfolio, I made a decision. No matter what happened at the party, I would not shrink into the background. I would take my camera. I would capture moments that nobody else saw, the whispered glances, the nervous laughter, the unspoken emotions simmering beneath polished smiles. Because that was my gift. I didn't care if they mocked me. I didn't care if Daniel rolled his eyes. For once in my life, I would stand tall in the thing that made me feel alive. Looking back now, I realize how naive I was. I thought the worst thing that could happen was being ignored again, the way I always was. I didn't know then that Daniel had plans of his own, that he would take something precious from me, something private, something meant only for me, and turn it into a weapon. I didn't know that one night my world would unravel, not because strangers hated my work, but because my own brother chose to humiliate me in the cruelest way possible. And it all began at that engagement party. The day of Sophia's engagement party arrived, with the kind of heavy anticipation that makes your stomach churn. The house buzzed with activity heels clicking across hardwood floors, the scent of hairspray mingling with garlic and roasted meat wafting from the kitchen, and laughter spilling through the halls. I stood in front of my mirror, clutching my camera bag, adjusting the strap over and over again like it was a shield I wasn't sure I deserved to carry. You're bringing that? Daniel's voice drifted from the doorway, already laced with amusement. He leaned against the frame in his crisp, navy blue suit, his tie knotted perfectly as if even fabric obeyed him. Yes, I said flatly. He smirked. Just don't get in the way, okay? This is Sophia's big night. Try not to make it about you and your little hobby. My fingers curled into fists around the strap. It's not a hobby. It's who I am. But instead of saying that, I simply brushed past him. The banquet hall was breathtaking crystal chandeliers spilling golden light across white draped tables, floral arrangements bursting with roses and baby's breath. Sophia, radiant in a pale pink gown, was the center of attention. Her fiancé Matteo hovered protectively at her side, a proud smile glued to his face. The air brimmed with chatter and clinking glasses. Waiters floated between tables with trays of champagne. Music hummed low in the background, the kind that makes everything feel more expensive than it really is. I slid into the role I knew best, invisible observer. My camera clicked softly as I moved through the room, capturing candid shots of Aunt, throwing her head back in laughter, a little cousin sneaking a cookie from the dessert table, Sophia's hand resting tenderly on Matteo's arm. Through the lens, I felt alive. Each click was validation that I could see what others overlooked. But Daniel wasn't far behind. Careful, he whispered once as he passed me, balancing 2 drinks. You don't want people thinking you're the hired photographer. I ignored him, focusing my lens on the dance floor. Yet his words lodged in my chest. Later, when we gathered around the head table for speeches, Daniel took the mic. His voice boomed with practiced ease. To Sophia and Matteo, he declared, raising his glass. May your love always be as strong as Sophia's obsession with Pinterest boards. The room erupted with laughter. Daniel thrived on it, his smile widening, his charm undeniable. And let's not forget, he continued, glancing toward me, that no family gathering is complete without Izzy sneaking around with her camera. I swear, one day she's going to publish a tell-all photo book called Awkward Relatives, The Candid Chronicles. The crowd chuckled. Even my parents laughed softly. My cheeks burned. I forced a smile, pretending it didn't sting, but inside, humiliation simmered. It wasn't until later, when the music swelled and the dance floor filled, that I realized Daniel had slipped away. I assumed he was chatting with cousins or charming some girl at the bar. I didn't know then that he had borrowed my camera earlier when I left it on the table for a quick bathroom break. I didn't know he had already gone through my memory card. Finding the folder I kept hidden, the one with photos I'd never intended for anyone else to see. Photos of me. They weren't glamorous. They weren't flattering. They were raw, vulnerable self-portraits I had taken during a dark spell. Images of me crying after a fight with my parents, curled up on my bed, staring blankly into the mirror. They weren't for the world, they were for me. A visual diary of my private battles. And Daniel, with his cruel sense of humor, saw an opportunity. It started with whispers, then gasps, then laughter, sharp, piercing, spreading like wildfire across the room. I turned, confused, my heart beginning to race. On the large projector screen meant for a slideshow of Sophia and Mateo's journey together, my face appeared. But not the smiling family photos I expected. No, there I was, red-dyed, blotchy, tears streaking my cheeks. Another picture, me hugging my knees in the corner of my bed. Another, my reflection in the mirror, hollow-eyed, defeated. The room roared with laughter. Is this performance art? Someone snickered. Oh my God, Izzy, what is this? An aunt gasped between chuckles. Froze. My throat closed up, my vision blurred. No, 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 I whispered, shaking my head. Across the room, Daniel stood by the projector with a smug grin, arms crossed, basking in the attention. Ladies and gentlemen, he announced, his voice dripping with mockery, a sneak peek at Isabella's artistic genius. She calls this series Sad Girl Chic. The room erupted again. My body went cold, then hot. My ears rang as if underwater. The humiliation was unbearable, every pair of eyes on me, dissecting me, mocking me. I wanted the floor to open up and swallow me whole. Tears stung my eyes, and I couldn't stop them. I turned and fled, camera clutched to my chest like a broken piece of armor. Behind me, the laughter followed. It echoed down the hall as I stumbled into the bathroom, locking myself in a stall. I pressed my back against the door, gasping for breath, my sobs uncontrollable. Why would he do this? My own brother. Why? I felt like I was drowning. Those photos were never meant for anyone. They were pieces of my soul, and Daniel had ripped them out, paraded them under a spotlight, and invited everyone to jeer. I stayed hidden until my mother came knocking. Isabella. Honey, come out. Her voice was soft, almost apologetic. But when I finally opened the door, her eyes held something else: embarrassment. Sweetheart, you shouldn't have taken those kinds of pictures, she whispered urgently. Glancing around to make sure no one was watching. People don't understand. They'll think you're unstable. Her words hit harder than any laugh. Even now, in my lowest moment, she was worried about appearances, about what people thought. I wanted comfort. I wanted someone to hold me, to tell me it wasn't my fault. But all I got was damage control. We left early. Daniel drove, whistling lightly, as if nothing had happened. I sat in the back seat, numb, staring out the window at the blur of passing streetlights. Finally, I found the courage to speak. Why did you do that? My voice cracked. Daniel glanced at me in the rearview mirror, his lips twitching into a smirk. Relax, Izzy. It was a joke. Lighten up. Everyone thought it was hilarious. It wasn't funny, I snapped, tears welling again. You humiliated me. He rolled his eyes. God, you're so dramatic. Maybe if you didn't take such pathetic pictures of yourself, I wouldn't have had material to work with. I recoiled at his words. My chest ached with betrayal so sharp it was physical. In that moment, I realized something chilling. My brother didn't just belittle me. He enjoyed breaking me. That night, I lay awake, replaying everything. The laughter. The stares. My mother's disappointment. Daniel's smirk. The humiliation was unbearable. Yes, but beneath it, something else stirred. Rage. Hot, pulsing, undeniable rage. Daniel thought he had one. He thought he could shatter me and that I'd crawl back into my quiet, invisible shell, too weak to fight back. But he didn't know that humiliation, when deep enough, doesn't destroy, transforms. And in the shadows of my shame, a fire began to burn. I would not let him get away with this. I didn't know how yet, but I would find a way. One day soon, Daniel would regret ever thinking he could destroy me. Sleep abandoned me for days after the party. I replayed that night in an endless loop, the laughter, the projector screen, Daniel's smirk as if my pain were his masterpiece. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw my tear-stained face blown up 10 feet tall, strangers pointing, mocking. I didn't eat much. I didn't talk to anyone. I barely touched my camera. It sat in the corner of my room like a wounded friend, reminding me of everything I had lost. But humiliation doesn't sit still. It festers, it transforms until it hardens into something else. For me, that something else was resolve. One evening, my best friend Clara came over. She had been at the party too, though she wasn't family. She was one of the few who hadn't laughed. In fact, she had chased after me when I fled, but I had shut her out. Now she sat cross-legged on my bed, her eyes filled with concern. "Isabella," she said gently, "you can't let him get away with this." Her words struck a chord. I wanted to ask, and what am I supposed to do? He's Daniel, the golden boy. Nobody ever believes he's capable of cruelty. Instead, I whispered, he ruined me, Clara. He took the most private parts of me and turned them into a circus. Clara placed her hand on mine. Then ruin him back. It sounded reckless, vindictive. But it also sounded right? That night, I began thinking, not as the broken sister, but as the silent observer I had always been. Observers notice things others don't. And I realized something. Daniel wasn't untouchable. He had secrets. He had flaws. He wasn't as perfect as he pretended to be. All I had to do was watch. It started small. A week later, I overheard Daniel on the phone. His voice was low, urgent, not the confident tone he used around our parents. "Listen, I told you I'd get the money." "No, I just need more time." "Don't threaten me, okay?" I said, "I'll handle it." My ears perked up. Money, threats. Daniel never mentioned anything about financial troubles. I filed it away in my mind. Another day, I noticed him sneaking out late at night, dressed in casual clothes, not his usual polished style. He returned hours later, looking agitated, sometimes smelling faintly of alcohol. The cracks widened. Curiosity became obsession. I couldn't confront him outright. I needed proof. So I did what Daniel had done to me. I invaded his privacy. One afternoon, when he left his laptop open in the living room, I hesitated only a second before sitting down. My heart hammered as I scrolled. Emails, dozens of them. From betting websites, loan companies, even shady usernames demanding repayment. My stomach dropped. Daniel, the flawless law student, the family's golden child, was drowning in debt. Gambling debt. And it was worse than I imagined. Thousands of dollars owed. Threats of legal action if he didn't pay soon. I sat frozen, the irony washing over me. Daniel had mocked my photos, called them pathetic, but here he was, a fraud teetering on the edge of ruin. For the first time in weeks, I smiled. That night at dinner, I studied him differently. Every confident grin, every boastful story to our parents about his classes, his friends, his future, I saw through it. He wasn't golden. He was rusting underneath, desperately covering the corrosion. I almost wanted to slam his laptop down on the table, shove the emails in his face, and watch my parents' expressions shift from pride to horror. But no, that would be too easy. Too quick. Daniel had humiliated me publicly. My revenge needed to be just as devastating. Clara was the one who planted the seed. "You know," she said carefully one afternoon, "what he did to you could actually be considered harassment. Maybe even defamation, depending on how far it spread." Her words hit me like a thunderbolt. Court? I had never thought of it that way. To me, it was just cruelty. But legally it could be something else. I began researching obsessively. Case after case where people were sued for sharing private images without consent. Even if Daniel claimed it was a joke, Even if he thought it was harmless legally, he had crossed a line. And suddenly I saw a path. Not just revenge, justice. I knew I couldn't go in blind. I needed proof of what Daniel had done and of who he really was. First, I saved everything I could from the party. Clara had managed to capture snippets on her phone, the laughter, the projector screen with my photos, Daniel standing proudly beside it. Those clips became my first pieces of evidence. Then, I returned to his laptop. Each time he carelessly left it unattended, I copied more files. Emails from loan sharks, bank statements, screenshots of his betting accounts. I built a digital arsenal folder after folder, each piece painting a clearer picture of Daniel's double life. The Golden Boy wasn't just a bully. He was reckless, dishonest, and spiraling toward disaster. I didn't plan to tell my parents right away, but fate forced my hand. One night, a man came to our door. He was rough-looking mid-30s with a scar running down his cheek. Daniel home? He asked gruffly. My father frowned. Who's asking? The man sneered. Tell him his debt's due. He knows what I mean. Then he turned and walked away, leaving my parents pale and bewildered. Daniel, who had been in the living room, leaped to his feet. Don't listen to him. He's crazy, he blurted. Too fast, too defensive. It's nothing. Just some mix-up. But I saw it in my parents' faces. Doubt, confusion, a seed of mistrust. I could have spoken then, exposed everything. But I held my tongue. Timing was everything. The more I thought about it, the clearer it became. I wasn't just going to expose Daniel to our family. I was going to take him to court. It wasn't about money, not for me. It was about power, about reclaiming the dignity he had stolen. And the beauty of it was this. In court, truth mattered. Proof mattered. Not charm, not charisma, not the golden image he wrapped himself in. Just cold, hard evidence. And I had plenty. One evening, I cornered Daniel in the kitchen. You think you're untouchable, don't you? I asked quietly. He raised an eyebrow, smirking. Oh, is this about the party again? Still sulking, I stepped closer. You humiliated me. You exposed private photos without my consent. That's not just cruel. Daniel, it's illegal. For the first time, his smirk faltered. Don't be ridiculous, he scoffed, but his eyes darted nervously. I leaned in. I have evidence, and I'm not afraid to use it. You think you can ruin me? Watch me ruin you instead. The color drained from his face. Just for a second, I saw fear, and it was intoxicating. I won't, like part of me hesitated. He was my brother. We shared childhood memories, inside jokes, holidays. Was I really prepared to destroy him? But then I remembered the projector screen. The laughter. My mother whispering that I shouldn't have taken those photos. Yes, I was prepared. Because Daniel had chosen this path. He had chosen to turn me into a punchline. And now he would learn what it felt like to be stripped bare in front of everyone. The final push came when I discovered something even darker. Among his emails was a thread with one of his professors. Daniel had been caught plagiarizing a paper, and the professor warned that another offense could lead to expulsion. So the Golden Boy wasn't just a gambler. He was a cheater. That sealed it for me. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. This was about justice, about protecting myself, and maybe even saving others from falling victim to his arrogance. As I stared at the mountain of evidence I had gathered, a strange calm washed over me. For the first time since the party, I didn't feel powerless. I felt strong. Daniel thought he had written the final chapter of my story when he projected those photos on the screen. But he was wrong. The story wasn't over. And soon, in a courtroom filled with witnesses, lawyers, and truth, Daniel would lose everything he had worked so hard to protect. The first time I walked into the courthouse, my knees trembled so badly I thought I might collapse. The cold marble floors stretched beneath me, the air thick with the smell of polished wood and nerves. My palms were damp against the handle of my bag, the same bag that carried every piece of evidence I had painstakingly gathered against my brother. I wasn't just here as a victim anymore. I was here as someone who refused to stay silent. Daniel, of course, arrived late. He strolled in wearing a pressed suit and that same smug confidence he wore everywhere. My parents trailed behind him, their faces drawn, confused, caught between two children they didn't recognize anymore. When his eyes met mine across the courtroom, he smirked. That familiar smirk that once made me feel small. But not this time. Not today. Today, I wasn't the little sister with a camera. I was his reckoning. My lawyer, Ms. Ramirez, was sharp and relentless. A woman who spoke with the calm authority of someone who knew the law inside out. She began with the basics. "Your Honor," she said firmly, "we are here today because the defendant, Daniel Rivera, publicly displayed private, humiliating images of my client, Isabella Rivera, without her consent. This constitutes not only a violation of her privacy, but also emotional distress and reputational harm." I watched Daniel shift in his seat, his jaw tightening. Ms. Ramirez continued. "Furthermore, we have evidence of a pattern of reckless behavior that undercuts the defendant's credibility and highlights his disregard for consequences." The judge, a stern man with silver hair, nodded gravely. For the first time, I felt the tide turning. Daniel's lawyer, a slick man with an expensive watch, tried to spin the story. It was a harmless prank, he insisted. A sibling joke that was taken out of context. There was no malice. Families tease each other. It's part of growing up. Tease, I muttered under my breath, my hands gripping the bench. Daniel looked at me then, his eyes glinting with mock innocence, as if he truly believed the court would buy his performance. But what he didn't know was that I had come armed with more than just my word. When it was my turn to testify, my heart pounded so loudly I could barely hear my own voice. But I forced myself to speak clearly. Those photos he showed at the party, they weren't jokes. They were private. They were taken during one of the lowest points of my life. They were never meant for anyone but me. The courtroom was silent, every ear tuned to my words. I continued. He stole them. And then he projected them on a 10-foot screen in front of our entire family, friends and strangers. People laughed at me. They humiliated me. And he stood there, proud of what he'd done. I gestured toward the monitor, where Ms. Ramirez queued up Clara's phone footage. The screen lit up with the video, Daniel by the projector. My tear-streaked face blown large behind him, and the sound of laughter filling the room. The courtroom gasped. Even the judge leaned forward, his brow furrowing. "This," Ms. Ramirez said firmly, "is not a harmless prank. This is exploitation. This is cruelty." I glanced at my parents. My mother's hand covered her mouth, her eyes wide with horror. My father stared at Daniel like he was seeing him for the first time. Daniel's smugness faltered. Daniel's lawyer tried to downplay it. "Isabella, wouldn't you agree that your brother was simply joking, that the intent wasn't to harm you?" I met his gaze steadily. Intent doesn't erase the impact. And you don't joke with someone's pain. That wasn't a joke, it was a betrayal. My words hung heavy in the air. Then came the moment I had been waiting for. Ms. Ramirez switched gears. "Mr. Rivera," she said, turning to Daniel, "is it true that you currently owe substantial gambling debts?" Daniel froze. "Objection." His lawyer barked. But the judge allowed it. Ms. Ramirez slid a stack of papers across the table. "We have bank statements, email correspondence, and betting account records. You claim to be responsible and trustworthy, but your actions prove otherwise. If you're reckless enough to gamble away thousands of dollars, what's to stop you from recklessly humiliating your own sister?" The courtroom erupted in murmurs. Daniel's face flushed crimson. "That has nothing to do with this," he shouted, his composure cracking. "Oh, but it does," Ms. Ramirez pressed. "Because it shows the truth, that you think you're above consequences. That you can gamble with money, gamble with integrity, and gamble with other people's dignity because you believe you'll never get caught." Daniel sputtered, but the damage was done. The final blow came when Ms. Ramirez revealed the emails between Daniel and his professor, the plagiarism warnings. The courtroom fell silent again. My parents looked shattered, their golden sun crumbling before their eyes. Daniel tried to protest. That was a misunderstanding. Everyone borrows ideas, but nobody was buying it. His image was shattered. In that moment, I saw it. The shift. The power he had held over me all my life dissolved, replaced by the undeniable truth of who he really was. Not a golden boy. Not a flawless son. Just a liar. A bully. A coward. After hours of testimony and arguments, the judge finally spoke. His voice was steady, firm. Mr. Rivera, your actions were cruel, irresponsible, and unlawful. You violated your sister's privacy and caused her significant emotional distress. This court finds in favor of the plaintiff, Isabella Rivera. My breath caught. I had one. The judge continued. You are ordered to pay damages, undergo mandatory counseling, and perform community service. Furthermore, this ruling will remain on your record should future employers or institutions require disclosure. I glanced at Daniel. His face was pale, his jaw clenched, his eyes burning with disbelief. He had lost everything. The news spread fast. Family, friends, acquaintances, all of them, heard about the trial. The golden boy who once basked in praise was now the subject of whispers and shame. At family gatherings, nobody asked about Daniel's law program anymore. They avoided him, their eyes filled with disappointment. And me. For the first time, people asked about me. About my photography. About my courage. The very thing he had tried to destroy became the thing that made me visible. Outside the courthouse, Daniel approached me, his eyes wild with fury. You think you've won? He spat. You think ruining me makes you strong? You're pathetic, Izzy. You'll always be pathetic. I stared at him, calm in a way I had never been before. No, Daniel, I said softly. I was pathetic when I let you treat me like nothing. But not anymore. You did this to yourself. I just refused to stay silent. For once, he had no response. He turned and stormed away, the weight of his downfall heavy on his shoulders. As I stood there, the courthouse looming behind me, I felt something I had never felt before. Freedom. Justice wasn't just about punishing him. It was about reclaiming my voice, my dignity, my identity. Daniel had lost everything he had, gambled his reputation, his credibility, his golden boy facade. And I had gained something priceless. Power. The days after the verdict felt strangely quiet. Like the silence after a storm. For weeks, my life had been a whirlwind of hearings. Lawyers, sleepless nights, and the weight of preparing myself to face Daniel in court. And now it was over. The world outside still spun as usual, cars honking in the streets. Neighbors mowing their lawns, the hum of daily life returning, but inside me, something monumental had shifted. I was no longer invisible. At the next family gathering, I braced myself for the usual cycle of humiliation. But it never came. Aunts and uncles who had once chuckled at Daniel's cruel jokes now avoided him entirely. Instead, they turned to me. Isabella, I saw your interview, one cousin said softly. You were so brave. Another relative added, you've always had an eye for truth. I just never realized how strong you were, too. For the first time, people weren't laughing at me, they were listening. They weren't dismissing me as the quiet one with a camera. They were seeing me as someone who stood up, who fought back, who won. It felt strange at first, like wearing clothes that didn't quite fit yet. But slowly, I grew into it. But not everything healed quickly. My parents struggled. My mother especially avoided eye contact with me for weeks. When she finally spoke, her words were hesitant. Izzy? I didn't realize how much you were hurting, she admitted, her voice trembling. I should have protected you that night. Instead, I made it worse. Her confession cracked something in me. For so long, I had begged silently for her acknowledgement. To hear it now, it was both painful and relieving. I just wanted you to see me, I whispered back. Tears welled in her eyes. I do now. I promise, I do now. It wasn't perfect. It didn't erase the years of being overlooked. But it was a start. My father, more stoic, said little. But one night, as he passed me in the hallway, he paused. "I'm proud of you, Isabella," he murmured. Those words, coming from a man who rarely offered praise, meant more than I could express. As for Daniel, his downfall was swift and merciless. His law program suspended him after news of the trial spread. The gambling debts caught up to him, with creditors circling like vultures. His friends, the ones who once adored his charm, quietly distanced themselves. For the first time in his life, Daniel was no longer the golden boy. I heard whispers from relatives, "Such a shame. He had so much potential. What a waste." And while a part of me pitied him, another part, the part that remembered the humiliation, the laughter, the way he'd smirked as I cried, felt no guilt. He had written his own tragedy. Ironically, the very thing Daniel tried to destroy became my salvation. In court, my photos had been framed as evidence of vulnerability, of violation. But outside, they began to mean something else. Clara encouraged me to submit my portfolio again, this time to local galleries. To my shock, one accepted. On opening night, I stood in a small but packed room, my photos hanging on white walls, strangers murmuring about them with genuine admiration. "These capture so much emotion," one woman said. "It's raw, it's real." And I realized what Daniel had tried to twist into humiliation was, in fact, my strength. My lens revealed truths people usually hid. My pain had become art. I was no longer afraid to show it. Standing there in that gallery, thought about the girl I had been before all of this, the quiet, invisible one who never spoke up, who let her brother's words cut her down again and again. She was gone. What remained was someone forged in fire, someone who had learned that silence only feeds cruelty. That dignity must be fought for, even against those closest to you. I learned that family doesn't excuse betrayal. Blood doesn't justify cruelty. And justice is not about revenge. It's about reclaiming the power that was stolen from you. Weeks later, Daniel and I crossed paths in the driveway. He looked thinner, weary, the arrogance drained from his face. He stopped, eyes narrowing. "You happy now?" He spat. "You ruined me." I took a deep breath, steady. "No, Daniel. You ruined yourself. All I did was stop you from ruining me too." For once, he didn't have a comeback. He turned and walked away, shoulders hunched. I didn't chase after him. I didn't need to, because I wasn't carrying his shadow anymore. As I sit here now, telling you this story, I think about that night at the party when my private pain was plastered on a projector screen for everyone to laugh at. At the time, it felt like the end of me, but it wasn't the end. It was the beginning. That night pushed me to fight back, to uncover the truth, to find my voice. Daniel lost everything. He gambled: his reputation, his career, his golden image. And I found everything I had been missing: my strength, my dignity, my future. If there's one thing I want anyone listening to take away, it's this: never let someone else define your worth. Not family, not friends, not anyone who tries to shrink you into silence. Because sometimes the greatest justice isn't just in punishing the one who hurt you. It's in finally stepping into the light yourself. And that's how I turned my deepest humiliation into justice. What about you? Have you ever been underestimated or betrayed by someone close to you? Share your story in the comments. I'd love to read it. If this story kept you hooked, make sure to hit that like button. It helps more than you know. Don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss the next tale of betrayal, revenge, and ultimate justice. Until then, remember, the best revenge is living your truth.